Um, okay, thank you very much for joining us. This is JIIPCC Mentorship and Internship Program. We run this quarterly. This is the first quarter for year 2021, and we have a total of 7 mentees that we are working with. Some are university students, some are master's students, some are already practicing lawyers. Um, Coincidentally, we have six girls, six ladies, and we have a guy with us. So it's like guys, women are more interested. Not so sure about that, but the we're already recruiting for the second quarter, and we also have a lot of women that are also signing up, although there are a few men. So what we do here, starting in this profession, it wasn't so easy for me because I didn't have who to talk to. I didn't have who to ask questions. And so what I did more was to read, listen to videos, etc. And I thought that coming this far, it would be better for people to have like senior sisters and senior brothers in the profession that they can just ask questions and try to understand the space better. So what we do here is that we ask them to write their assignments, and then we listen to their assignments and just discuss it. And then once in a while, we also bring guest lecturers or guest mentors, and we have brought like people to talk about music law, film law, litigation, different areas of IP. And so today we thought that it would be good for us to discuss fashion law. And you are an authority in this particular field, in the entertainment industry generally. Most of the people that we see now talking about IP, most of them call you their mentor. So that means you have been doing this already for a long time, and we are honored to have you here. So our guest for today is Miss Uduak, and I'll be reading her bio so that we can know who would be talking to us today. Miss Uduak is a passionate and experienced attorney at Fashion Ent Law, who helps creative leaders and entrepreneurs significantly increase their bottom lines, all while reducing or avoiding risk. She has litigated wide variety of issues in California courts and represented and counseled a range of clients in matters ranging from contracts, disputes, copyright and trademark infringement claims, licensing to all types of diverse music, fashion, and film industry agreements. Ms. Uduak also brings a unique background to problem solving legal issues for her clients. She's an ex-fashion model and has over 2 decades hands-on fashion and entertainment industry experience, which runs deep and diverse, encompassing the discipline of media, publishing, journalism, fashion, modeling, music, branding, public relations, sponsorship, fundraising, and digital marketing. Ms. Uduak is also a recognized thought leader and trailblazer for her work on Africa's emerging global fashion and entertainment markets and the niche practice of fashion law in the United States. And in fact, has authored a combined total of over 11,000 articles, some of which have been syndicated globally. She's also an adjunct professor who teaches social media law and ethics and social media data analytics at the Academy of Arts University in San Francisco. In 2019, Ms. Uduak crafted, inaugurated, and taught the first ever fashion law course at California State University, Sacramento. For her work in the field of law, fashion, entertainment, and media, she has earned numerous nominations and recognition, including awards from the American University Washington College of Law for her legal impact in the field of intellectual property in Africa. She has also been a legal commentator and an invited speaker to numerous organizations, including the Fashion Law Institute, Wharton Business School of Business, SXSW Inc., California Lawyers for the Arts, Al Jazeera, Fox 40 News, and New York's 107.5 FM WBLS. We are honored to have you. Thank you so much for saying yes. And we are excited to listen to you. So please, the floor is yours.
Sure. Mentorship, I never turn down. You and I share the same passion of ensuring that there's a pipeline of brilliant young lawyers, particularly in the creative arts industry, that can serve our people. We need to do that. It's not enough to just be Africans or Nigerians. We have a legacy to pass on, and intellectual property is so amazing as a subset of some of the areas I'll talk about in fashion law, because it's not as restrictive. As I say all the time, we've been blessed with IP in our heads. Nobody can tell you, because you're a woman, there's only so far you can go. If you create an IP, it can go global, regardless of what that IP may be. No one can restrict you to land because the land is in your head, and the list goes on of what's so beautiful about intellectual property law, but it's just a subset of fashion law. Thank you for introducing my background. What I want to convey is how we approach law, because once you think about how you approach law, it affects the way you come at it professionally as a young lawyer, ultimately, and how you represent your clients. So you must always ask yourself as a young lawyer, what is my vision? Why am I in this thing? What do I want to accomplish from this? And I think that it will direct your path. So the way what I wanted to accomplish, and why I ended up doing fashion and entertainment law, and of course litigation work as well, which I'm very passionate about as well, is because from day one, when I was growing up in Nigeria, I was born here in the States, but I grew up in Nigeria, and I did not like how I was made to feel as a young girl growing up. I felt like I didn't have a voice, but being the rebellious personality type, I made sure I had a voice. I wanted equity between girls and boys. I wanted to do the same things boys were allowed to do growing up. And in the process of that rebellion, I read a book at a young age in Yoruba language. I'm actually from the Akwa Ibom region, but born here in the States, grew up in Lagos, and did not know that I was not Calabar. So the whole time I thought I was Yoruba, and I've always read so fluently, speak, read, and write Yoruba. So I was reading a book. I must have been I wasn't for sure. I wasn't yet in primary 3 for sure. But I read a book in Yoruba language about a young girl called Agbeke. And it was a fascinating story about how she was accused of wrongdoing by her master's wife. And then there was a whole court proceeding. Yorubas are very good storytellers, which is very intriguing. So there's a whole court proceeding that came about. And I still remember the illustration and sketch where she was even put on a stand to have to defend herself about stealing from her master's wife. Without knowing my extensive and rich judicial and law enforcement and legal heritage on the paternal side, I said, guess what? I want to be a lawyer. And at that young age, I've never wavered. And so the vision for me, and why I talked about as a lawyer, you must know your vision, was how do I create equity in our society, starting first with our home country, Nigeria, and of course, spreading everywhere. And for me, law has been that tool for social engineer. And then I simply combine my passions. The creative side is from my maternal side. The legal side is from my paternal side. And I happen to be someone who carries both. And it's important to emphasize that, because fashion law and even entertainment law in Nigeria is a relatively new thing. A lot of the young entertainment lawyers you're seeing literally came on my blog, africanmusiclaw.com, to help fashion and shape a lot of the careers you're seeing now in Nigeria. So if you don't understand the vision, you don't know where you're going. And in a country like Nigeria, where you're told to fall in line for the most part and go a particular career route, you cannot be a fashion lawyer and you can't be an entertainment lawyer. You're gonna just be restricted to intellectual property as a subset. And there's so many practitioners that it makes it hard to even compete, especially as a young lawyer, where a lot of it is into the status of each lawyer. So I'm a 20-year experienced lawyer, and there's such disparity in how we communicate generally in the practice of law. Whereas in the US, you get your license, your license to practice, we're more focusing on what you know. Of course, there's certain times you'll be treated as a young lawyer, but overall, there's respect for you when you walk into the courtroom and you're treated equitably and respect. They just want to know you know your knowledge and you can represent your clients well. So you can't then stay in Nigerian society and say, I want to be a fashion lawyer, I want to be an entertainment lawyer, and not have a backbone and internal constitution that can withstand and has the ability to carve your own pathway, because a career in this area requires you to almost be or become an entrepreneur and create your own pathway. So for me, knowing what I wanted to do and having that vision, and entertainment law was already here, but for fashion law, it wasn't here when I finished school over 20 years ago. And even in law school, I was already talking about I was going to do fashion law. And so people would just make the assumption that because I was doing fashion law, first, they wanted to know which school I was going to, because I must not have gone to law school. And if I did, it's certainly not the top schools, because what is fashion law? Are you just going to play dress up all day? So that was that part. And then in addition, there were very few people even doing fashion law. Now we've gotten to a stage where we even have one major fashion law institute. And then that's on the East Coast. On the West Coast in California, we also have a fashion law school. And then all across the country, few people teaching individual fashion law courses. The way I've been able to carve out my career pathway has been to learn, just like you, Juliana. I had to learn fashion law, figure it out. And what I immediately realized was that it was a discipline that encompassed all areas of the law. So fashion law is not one thing, just like entertainment law is not one thing. It's encompassing, and it runs a gamut all the way from employment law to labor law, to real estate law, to social media law happening right now, to copyright and trademarks and patents. It covers the gamut. So your key thing as a future industry professional, current industry professional, if you want to go that direction, is to first understand the industry. As lawyers, we rely very heavily on the facts to issue spot. First, you have to know the law unequivocally. But in order to determine for your clients what the legal issues are, you need to understand the industry. If you don't understand the industry, probability is you're going to waste a lot of resources and time for your clients and not going to work very efficiently. And if you don't do that, they're going to go somewhere else because the market, the competition is steep. So you need to know the industry. So it's good to do a lot of the theory reading, but you've got to immerse yourself in it. For me, I've always been immersed, background fashion model, and then all this other things I've done in the industry. So I'll stop there, and then any questions and things you want to follow up, I'm here to answer them. And I approach things particularly two trackways: substantive law and entrepreneurship. I think both go hand in hand. So I never talk about one without thinking that. And then if you don't want to own your own and you want to work for other firms, because in Nigeria now we're having more and more firms come out and emerging with entertainment law, and there's still no fashion law really. It's still very rare. There's few fashion lawyers in Nigeria, and even then they're under a broad umbrella. But if you're going to work for someone else, then it's substantive and then creating your personal brand as you do that. So you're always on those two tracks, either entrepreneur and substantive law, or personal brand and substantive law, but never where you're just only doing the work. That's very myopic. You have to think on a wider level and the future of your career. All right, I'll stop there. Anyone have questions? I'm happy to answer.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Uduak. Thank you for shining light on fashion law and on entertainment law generally and IP. Okay, so we have a question from Bernice. You people can just put your mics on and ask your questions. Why are you writing them down?
Sure, Bernice, feel free to ask. How are you?
Bernice, you can just put your mic on and ask. Clarice, you can ask. Christina, you can ask your question. Daniel. So I'll just start reading it out, but I'm just giving people the option to also ask.
I see Bernice is unmuted, so Bernice.
Okay. Bernice, please.
Hello. Good afternoon, Ma.
How are you?
I'm fine, Ma. Thank you very much for coming on our mentorship program.
Sure.
Yes. My question is, what are the other pillars of fashion law aside intellectual property?
So like I said, there are several subgenres of fashion law. It all depends. So there's real estate. So right now with the whole pandemic, you've heard about all kinds of retail stores shutting down, unable to continue business. In Nigeria, for example, you know, the famous Palms Mall in Lagos, for example. Palms Malls are every places. So a lot of those retailers, the fashion retailers and the designers who had shops there, most likely had to deal with what do? We either paid up front a year or two in advance, and now pandemic has hit. And so because the pandemic has hit, what do we do? Well, they can renegotiate that deal with the landlords, if the landlords if the landlord is willing to renegotiate the deal or figure out something they can work out. So that's real estate is just one subset of that. There's supply chain logistics. How do you get a good or product to a store in, you know, at the right time, right place, etc. And that involves your distribution chain. So there's the whole supply chain logistics aspect of law. That's employment law, all the people you're hiring to create the product, the fashion product that you're interested in. That's part of that. There's so many different areas of law. There's music law or fashion music law for all the clearances involved when you have your production, whether it's online and you're showing a campaign. You need music for that. Often you need to clear those you need the clearance rights for the music you're using, or if you're performing that music during a runway show, you need to make sure you have the clearance rights to be able to do that as well. So there's fashion music, there's fashion film, the whole costuming aspect that goes into fashion film. You know, for a movie, all that production side of things, things involved in that, copyright that may come in from design elements of a fashion or fabric, among other things. So Bernice, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. How about you, Clarice? Would you like to ask your question yourself, or I should go ahead and read it? Okay. So her question is, what is the best way to deal with cultural appropriation in the fashion industry? Take the example of Black Panther and the Ghanaian Kente, or Coming to America too, and the Nigerian designs.
Yeah, so there are several ways to do that. On the Black Panther, for example, if you're talking about the Kente clothing, that is a historic folklore related clothing. So the government, Nigeria has something similar. The government has a vested interest in protecting on the copyright side of things, that particular Kente design pattern, because that can't be said to be or belong to one particular Ghanaian in that country, right? Because it's a whole fabric. It's sort of like our Ashoke designs, you know, or some of our other more traditional tie-dye clothing in Nigeria that we use, they come from decades and decades and decades of our ancestors, right? So nobody in here, if a designer goes and takes that fabric and cuts out a nice little silhouette and stitches up a nice design, they can't lay claim to the fabric design pattern on that particular piece of clothing because it belongs collectively to us Nigerians, or maybe that particular tribe of Yoruba people or people who have that design. So we do have copyright protection for those kinds of folklore related design patterns. So that's one thing. Now, when you're just talking about, so that would be for the whole Black Panther discussion that you're talking about. When you're talking on the Coming to America recent issue, I think that was the Ugo Mozzie issue of where he said that allegedly a work was infringed and that he had registered the work. So he already registered it and had under your intellectual property, industrial design. So he already had that. And all he needs to do is enforce it in Nigeria. And the way you enforce that is the fact that you've got a movie. The movie is global and comes from the US market. And there's reciprocity with the Berne Convention, among other treaties, when it comes to copyright law. So if someone has violated your copyrighted work and they live in a different country, but have a relationship or part of the treaty of the Berne Convention, then if you've registered it in Nigeria, you should be talking to a lawyer locally there and saying, hey, I have come into America from the US, but my work was infringed. and distributed and shown in Nigeria. And I've registered the work in Nigeria. Can you help me with the legal issues? There are two ways they can approach it. The local lawyer there can send a cease and desist letter, or the local lawyer can also team up with a lawyer over here in the US and look into the legal approach of how to help defend that case of infringement. So those will be the two ways you can approach it.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd like to also add that geographical indication is something that states and countries can also use to protect things that are peculiar to those countries or those states, but not every country is a signatory to the conventions for that. So that's like another way that countries and states can protect their heritage and then gain from it also.
Absolutely, not every country is, but in this specific fact pattern, we do have the US as one and Nigeria as one. So in that case, there's nothing to stop the creative from going and sitting with your legal counsel and getting consultation on that issue to figure out what the legal rights are.
Yes, of course. Okay, so Clarice is also saying, thank you so much. In that light, is it advisable to copyright your fashion design and also apply for an industrial design over it?
Yeah, so you guys' law are slightly different from ours with the way you even mentioned like industrial design versus copyright designs. In the US, fashion does not enjoy copyright protection generally, as a general rule. There are specific instances where it does. So for example, if you have that fabric that you created some sort of artwork and then it's imprinted on the fabric now, that artwork that's imprinted on it enjoys copyright protection. But as a general rule, fashion is seen more as a functional, utilitarian, very functional, let me use it more, very functional use. So we don't want a monopoly where Juliana is claiming that what I'm wearing right now, she, by virtue of the basic design and silhouette of this blouse, that she owns it. No, she doesn't, because then we're all not gonna have clothes to wear. So there's gotta be some sort of a uniqueness about what she brings to the table in the US. Nigerian law is a little bit different on that, and but very similar to some extent. And that's why you could have Ugo Mosey, where I believe the designer was Ugo Mosey, right, Juliana, for the claim for the Coming to America violation. But anyway, that's why you can have a designer claim, for example, I created a fabric or I created a fabric pattern, and that was actually, violated by infringement for the use of without my permission. So hope that answers your question.
Okay, I think here in Nigeria, we have textile design protection under industrial design. So people who make cloth patterns, etc., it's possible for them to protect it under that, but it has to be unique. They have to do a search for it and all that. So what some people do is that they first go ahead to do a copyright protection, and then they try to go through that textile design protection. So they first go for the search, and then if it's available, then they go ahead to do the protection. So I know that that's what it's usually done when it comes to
slightly different, exactly. Now we do have a different arm for patents, for example. If you have inventions, patents are meant to protect inventions, and that does extend into fashion for design, right? So we do have design patents as well. So an invention of particular design can be protected here. But I know you guys have the industrial design language, and it's pretty much functions the same way based on your explanation. You just use different lingo of how you identify it. I think that's more of the British kind of legal studies.
Yeah. Okay. Daniel, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, I actually want to ask a question, but I think she has our method for today has answered a great extent of my question. And I don't know, it seems the infringement on fashion has to do mostly revolves around design. That's one, but I just want to ask, in a situation whereas we have local designers, for instance, who most times do not have access to sophisticated gadgets. Sometimes they make a particular design and they make for somebody and then the patterns are now made. Now, in this kind of situation, what advice would someone like a local designer who has no inkling of this copyright stuff, and then this design has now there are now several patterns, there are now several design out there. So what I don't use the word proactive, I'm very because it's no longer proactive. What can such designer do to protect
Still
that
go and
particular
finish
design?
your work. They can still, if they're saying, oh, I can't believe it. I created this pattern. It's unique to me and my creativity. There's nothing like it out there. And now it's been infringed upon. Obviously, they use it in local terms. I mean, what's happening now and not steal my work now. So if they use that very local, straight up, somebody is stolen from me and I worked so hard and created this unique pattern. There's no other way to educate them if you're someone who's aware of that, then you educate them and turn them over to a lawyer. But most people don't know that, and it's hard to be able to. I mean, a lot of our artwork globally, a lot of African art that are being stolen and infringed upon, and so a lot of the creators don't get any remedy because half the time a lot of people don't even know. They just create and then it is what it is in terms of no way of educating them. But I think you just keep getting the word out and the information out and hoping that more and more people are aware of it. I know a lot of high-end fashion designers. So the big brand names, one of the things they do is they contract with the local arts and crafts or local artisans in the different villages to actually create patterns for them. So that's one medium where those people might educate, but they really have no obligation per se to educate those artisans. All they have an obligation is to be fair and do true dealing with them. And half the time too, even when they commission certain works, they don't put it in writing and there's no contract to even pass on that IP. But one of the things I want to stress also is, I think it was Clarice that asked the question about other areas of law under fashion. What I find even here in the US is a lot of students and future professionals spend the bulk of their time asking questions about copyright in fashion. But you've got to look at where the reality of that particular type of practice is. I've told you, for example, in general, fashion does not enjoy copyright protection unless in particular situations because it's seen as being functional overall. And then I've said there are distinctions, including design patents that can give you that kind of protection, or certain if it goes beyond it just being a functional outfit for you to wear. So that tells you that in fashion, there's a high probability, there's not much emphasis in where people make their money, including designers, on copyright work, right? Because then they will be super broke. Copyright, you can spend that kind of time when you're talking film and music, because the essence of monetization through licensing or assignment of rights in film and music is copyright law. So if you're in that space, you absolutely have to know it inside out. In the fashion realm, you're dealing more with trademarks, right? So it's a lot more name focused and who you know, what you know, whether you're in or out in fashion. It's a very elitist kind of industry. So name absolutely matters, although with new technologies, et cetera, things have been knocked down where people are getting more access and gatekeepers are no longer the ones saying, no, you can't come in. So as a future practitioner, don't focus too much on, be aware of copyright law, obviously, but follow the money as well. In fashion, you always follow the money. And so if you follow the money, by that I say where the job is, where the opportunities are, where the questions are, you're going to see that it takes you to trademark law. You're going to see that it takes you to other areas of the law. Employment is a big one in fashion. A lot of labor and employment violations across the entire fashion value chain for a lot of the people who are producing the products, the apparel products, the different kind of products that are produced in fashion that literally are underpaid and in horrible working conditions all over the world, and certainly also in Nigeria. So as a future practitioner, zoom in, because I see it a lot also from when I get a lot of mentors approach me from the Nigerian market. It's always, oh, I want to do IP, and then copyright. And that's about the extent of their discussion. No, it's more expansive than that.
Okay, thank you. Daniel, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, yes, ma. I think I also have two other follow-up questions.
Sure.
I remember we mentioned folklore, and we brought the instance of Black Panther and coming to America. I don't know. I've not come across any JIP law that protects. I think you mentioned one, man, that protects folklore. But I just want to ask, that's where a lot of film producers or we see some designs that are known to a particular tribe or a particular group of people. Now they are used in a particular movie, but you see that these people, those who have used this design, they've actually gone ahead to either trademark or to register this same design. Now, I think registration has to do with the first come basis. So whoever has registered first. Now, that means these originators of this folklore, these originators are missing out or will miss out from monetization of these designs because these designs have either been trademarked or they've been protected under Design Act. So in this kind of situation, in this kind of scenario, what can this group of people, what can they do? What can they do to ensure that these scenarios not happen? Maybe perhaps sign an agreement. Of course, most times these movie producers do not ask for consent. They don't get consent from these folklore people because they are not known. We don't know them. It's until we see them in the movies, then we began to, that is when these designs become known. People began to wear the design. So in this kind of situation, it looks complicated, but what would be your advice, Ma? And if someone is a fashion law practitioner, how do we step into salvage this kind of situation? That's my question.
If a particular design belongs to a particular tribe, then the tribe collectively under Nigerian law, but it's been a minute I've looked at that specific statute, but I'm well aware that there's a statute that actually protects a folklorish kind of copyright related works. And the government or the government entity, where the local or federal government entity would be more responsible for handling that. And there's a whole process from my memory of reading the statute where you have, whoever the particular person using the work has to then ask for that permission directly from that government agency. And then the proceeds are then, disseminated to that particular tribe as part of their compensation. But be sure to check that again. I just remember reading that very carefully and I was intrigued by that. This has been a little while now. So the response to it is an entire tribe cannot come after, for example, a designer and say, pay us this, because it sort of belongs to the tribe collectively. So they have to use the mechanism set in the law in order to be able to get their remedy. That's what I would say should be the right direction. And then so it would be going, if they're aware of it, going to a fashion lawyer and having them follow up. And I would use several examples. One example is a long time ago, Mac Bowers, if I recall correctly, an American designer, used the unique Ethiopian fabrics, the Ethiopian garment, how they wear their fabrics with all their embroidery and designs. He used it as one of his spring collection inspired works that he then sent down the runway. And the Ethiopian government stepped in and were threatening, or either they threatened or actually sued him for copyright infringement, because they said that belongs to their country, that is their ethnic wear. And so the American designer cannot just take their designs and then say, I was inspired by, and put that on a runway and make money off it. So those kinds of particular copyright protections are available almost across the majority of African countries, including Nigeria, and it would be up to the government to step in and intervene in that. The other part one that it's alleged, but there's no definitive, is the whole Amazing Grace song that's sung worldwide. The melody is said to come from the Efik people specifically, so my region, right? But we don't have any, and not only that, that would then be the federal government stepping in at the time for the copyright protection when John Newton allegedly came over here and then took that melody and penned his own lyrics to the melody, right? Because that song is global now. It's generated revenues for all kinds of people, but it's not coming back to us locally in Nigeria. So it's just being aware, telling our history and stories, and educating ourselves. Obviously, we need a lot more fashion lawyers to do that education. And we're not even done with entertainment yet. Entertainment law, we're barely scratching the surface to get more. But as we continue to have these discussions, mentorships, create the pipelines for future fashion and entertainment lawyers, then obviously we'll get to do better in order to better protect our heritage, which is why when I started this discussion, I said, understand your vision, understand what you're trying to do. And a big part of IP work, a big part of fashion entertainment work is not just about making money. It's also about protecting heritage, protecting the culture, and preserving the culture as well. Okay, did that make sense for you, Danielle, or you, Daniel, or you have further questions?
No, yeah, yes, it did. Actually, I'm enlightened and well educated.
Okay.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Okay, so Bernice asked a question. Do you think advocating for a tailor-made law protecting fashion design is advisable, considering the fact that fashion designs are basically reworking of designs that have been trended or existed before, that
Yeah,
have trended or existed before?
and Paris, that's been the debate and continues to be the debate. Some years back in the US, there was the argument that they should, that in Paris, we do have such protection, or the Parisian people have such protection. They have a 3 years copyright protection, but our own legislators did not feel the same way. So they struck that down. Maybe in future it will come up. And the key thing was sort of like protecting the small voices that the larger brands might go to underserved communities here or marginalized communities here, let's say the ghetto communities in America, and draw inspiration from them or the streets, and then, you know, register that copyright. And now what happens to the person who actually created it and maybe might not have a way to show that, among other arguments, including the functionality of it all, that we just don't want to go that direction. So I think that's a call that a particular society has to make for themselves and its creatives. And right now, I think it would be for the fashion community in Nigeria to make that call. Obviously, the law already protects us with that whole tribal patterns that we're creating. We just have to use it. But anything beyond the scope of that, that's very functional, that's a different story. And I think that might create a lot of confusion for a lot of people or create that concern over, you know, monopoly, right? Okay, so I have a blouse, a bubani row. How many ways can you cut a bubani row, and why are you claiming that you own it? You don't own it. It's what we wear. Even some of the patterns and designs, when you start having the Ankara particular bubani row, the Ankaras are not even ours. The fabric is from the Dutch people. We've made it exclusively ours because we're the highest consumer of that, the whole of sub-Saharan West Africa, but we're not even creating the textiles in that instance. Our textiles are more of our local, the adires that we're creating are ours, our showcase, you know, and other textiles that we're making. But beyond that, you know, what are you gonna go sue somebody because they created a certain kind of agbada or whatever? No. In the instance of the designer that made a claim with respect to coming to America. He has a very unique design on Ebuka, the host, is the one who wears a lot of his clothing. And the agbada that this particular designer had created in the past was one we all said, whoa, what is that? I think you remember that purple or burgundy, deep burgundy color agbada that Ebuka wore in one of his hosting, I believe, or one of the events he attended, and had some really unique embroidery on it. And even the pattern of the agbada was different. So that's a different story. Then yeah, and that's why he most likely was able to get that industrial design registration that he's talking about that he has, because it's so unique. But beyond the scope of that, our forefathers and before that have been wearing agbadas, and our mothers and foremothers. Nobody ever says foremothers, but I'm saying foremothers. Our foremothers have been wearing, buba, Iran buba. So, what exactly is going to be our different styles? And then every other traditional outfits we wear, whether it's the Calabar people or the Igbos or the Bendalites, like all the different stuff that we wear for our traditional regions, we already have those protections under that copyright folklore related design pattern protection. So that's how I would answer.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Daniel, Christina, Bernice, Clarice.
Yes, I do have a question.
Okay.
Good evening, ma.
Hello, Christina.
Yes, good evening. Most of my questions have actually been answered, but I just want to ask that apart from registering a brand that's, let me say my brand, how else can I protect it? That's brands and designs.
What would be your trademark? Fashion relies very heavily on trademark law to protect itself. So the idea of trademark law is it's a source identifier that distinguishes one good or service from another. So I have the brand Lady Brill. It's a fashion focused brand, and it has a registered trademark, and it distinguishes my brand Lady Brill from any other, as the person or as the company or source of the kind of product I produce out there, which tends to be a lot more fashion content than maybe a different source or good from another person. So the whole idea of that trademark protection is to allow those who have spent a lot of marketing and promotions dollars to build their brand equity to be able to enjoy it, and not have someone show up and say, oh, you know what? Okay, you've built Milo, and Milo is the big thing that everybody drinks now. And then someone else comes and says, I'm Milo, but with an E, and then they benefit from all the work that you've done. So that creates what's called the likelihood of confusion in the marketplace, where consumers are confused about which Milo should they be drinking, Milo with the M-I-L-O or Milo with M-I-L-O-E, right? So trademark protects you, and for the fashion context, that's where you see a lot of designers really use that with their logos to particularly protect their brands. And then they build that out, and then to make money, they license it once they've built their brands out as big as they could possibly do. Or even if it's not that big, they license out that. So you'll see a Marc Jacobs, or you'll see, think of other major brands, they'll license it all over the world. So if you hear about Gucci, for example, in Brazil, it might not be the same Gucci in Italy per se, like the owners running it. They've just licensed the name to Gucci, somebody else in Brazil who's the owner that says, who's actually the owner in Brazil that then handles all that. But the same, they speak the same one voice of Gucci products, visual image, visual identity, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be on
the quality is also the same. The quality.
Say that again, Christiana.
Are the qualities also the same? The qualities of the product. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, it should be the same. It is up to the licensor to make sure that the licensee complies with ensuring the brand quality and the image and visibility and products are the same. And generally with the licensing agreement, where it comes to the trademark licensing agreement, it will provide for all those details to ensure that the person purchasing that, you know, license for however long they do, don't go and basically ruin the reputation of the brand owner or the licensor. So generally licensors will even have like a whole portfolio of how to help you make sure you execute right on
Okay, thank you. I also want to ask, you talked about in your introductory statement, you talked about having a backbone. I would
that.
want you to talk more about that.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very important thing, especially in the context of Nigeria. And I don't see enough young lawyers asking questions about how to build their careers. Law, you're gonna have to know. You have no choice, and you have to take a bar exam to pass and become sworn in to become a lawyer. But a lot of people don't know about the industry, and they also don't understand how to navigate that. The way I grew up in Nigeria is quite different. I grew up in the 80s, and it was a time where you know, a lot of, you know, monogamous families living together or polygamous families, but they still had fathers present. I did not have the luxury of having a father present in my life. My father was always abroad, and that played a big role with how my family was treated growing up in Lagos. And for me, I immediately, based on my background and places that I grew up, studying first with Lagos, particularly Ikeja, very close to Ajegunle, and then relocated later on to Ejigbo. But very, very quickly, I had to learn survival skills and street skills and smarts. And I think that you have to have that approach if you want to be a business owner or a fashion and entertainment lawyer in Nigeria. Because first of all, the pathway is not there. You have to carve it out. And you're going to keep answering questions over and over again on what exactly you're doing, because nobody understands it. Also, with technology, there's such a big disparity with old school lawyers who are still using papers and all that and spending gazillion hours at the courthouse, and the judiciary would think cases not moving if you're litigation side of things. And on the transactional side, in a very, very man no man society, you can, if you know no man, you know, go get up there, end of story, period, point blank. You know, if no sabi person, nobody go open door for you. So you have to be creative, you have to use new technologies, and you have to say, this is what I want to do. You're probably going to end up making a lot more money. I was so shocked to hear that the average lawyer in Nigeria makes less than $500, almost $300 on a monthly basis. That's like an abomination. You know, I've never heard that before. So probability is if you strike out on your own, you're gonna make a lot more. Plus, you don't have to deal with all that stress of people questioning you and thinking you've gone completely crazy, which you have, obviously, because you're not willing to conform and you want to follow your passion. But that also means you have to be very strategic on how you launch your career. So if you launch and you're having offers being made to you in large firms or medium-sized firms or even small firms, absolutely go and learn the infrastructure of how to run a business and how to be a lawyer. But if you don't have that luxury and no one's knocking on your door and hiring you, then set up your own shingle. You have a bar license and learn all you can about entertainment law or fashion law. You have someone like Juliana. I'm online as well, lots of resources on my platforms, and learn all that. And then now that everybody's gone virtual, pandemic has allowed everybody to go virtual, start taking on clients virtually. You don't have to be in a particular state nationwide in Nigeria, unlike the US where you need a license for every single state, especially on the common law case type of cases like contract law. Intellectual property here is federal, so we can take on anyone anywhere in the US, right? But for you, you just need one license generally, whether it's contract or non-contract, one license nationwide for everybody. So you can stay in Lagos and take people from all over the country virtual when you have a virtual setup, and then do that personal branding I'm talking about. Put yourself out as an attorney who focuses on that entertainment law, getting into the music industry or film industry, volunteer and spend time, whether it's if there's a production coming, or theater production or film production, volunteer to be the usher, greeting people and having people come in to Film House Cinema for the screening of a major movie, volunteer in different areas, so long as it's creative and it's in the area you're interested in, volunteer and get a lot of that experience. And then, of course, you're also learning and taking on clients to help you and working with other attorneys, local and abroad, that can mentor you and say, okay, this is the direction you think about going. Watch a lot of YouTube videos, like Juliana said she watched. Sometimes, as much as you want a mentor to be there, sometimes when you're trailblazing things, you might not have that. You might not have that. Or if you do have those mentors, they're very busy doing other things. So you're going to have to mentor yourself sometimes. And mentoring yourself is watching those people on YouTube or following their social media platforms and staying very close to what they have to say. Because while they might not have time for you, they've already done the work, whether it's through their podcast, their websites, YouTube, etc. Use those resources or their social media platforms, and then carve out what you want and go and be confident and ask for what you want with representing those clients. You are competent to do so. That's why you have a license. And competency also means that you research and learn the areas you don't know and team up with attorneys who are a bit more experienced in that area.
Thank you very much, Ms. Uduak. I think Clarice has a question.
Good evening.
Good evening, Clarice. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. You were talking about brands, and I couldn't help think about brands and the counterfeits in the fashion industry, especially here in Africa, where there's an influx of counterfeit fashion goods, from Gucci to Hermes, all of them. So I just wanted you to maybe comment on that and how these brands deal with the issue of counterfeits.
Yeah, counterfeit goods are a major problem. And basically with counterfeits, you're having people basically infringe on the trademarks of this particular designers. So in terms of how to deal, and then, the product, everything looks exactly like as if they made it, including down to their logos. So how do you deal with that? In the US, it's still a major problem. Lots of money lost to counterfeiters. There've been so many different approaches. Some designers have said, you know what, we're only going to produce the quantity we think everybody needs, and then the rest of it, we burn it. And there was an outcry about doing that on the US end and the Western end as a whole, that you're wasting money. Why would you burn that just because you don't want counterfeiters to use the product? So some of the brands that decided to do that changed their minds on that. Other brands have been more hands-on with trying to educate law enforcement about how to tell the difference with the fake Louis Vuitton and original Louis Vuitton, for example. Some brands, the copiers are so great at what they do, you can't tell the difference. So a lot of brands are really focused in educating in that sense. And then, of course, in the US, we also have Border Patrol that, ensures in terms of the importing of goods. All of that stuff is checked at customs to be able to see whether those goods are counterfeits or not. And then sometimes even the retailer that's purchasing the product gets completely confused that it's in fact counterfeit. I've had matters where, they thought it wasn't and everything seemed so real, and then it turned out it was. So it all really depends on you also, if you're the retailer buying the product to sell, ensuring that you really, really, really understand the difference. And sometimes it's so hard and so subtle, it's so hard to tell, but you just gotta know your product and know who you're getting it from and get it directly from the source as well, as opposed to third parties. So in the African context, it's real. And not only that, I would say even extends beyond the fashion side to drugs. I mean, we have counterfeit drugs that are killing a lot of people on the continent with no regulations or no enforcement of the regulations. So how do you deal with it? It's still gonna be back to lawmakers helping to enforce it. there's no getting around it. You look at a lot of the, unfortunately, some of the Chinese products in the Nigerian market, and it's from the fashion part of things to other areas, it's a problem. It's a drastic problem, and across the African continent. So the real solution is, unfortunately, I say unfortunate because our governments are so slow with everything. Sometimes it just never happens. 90 years later, 100 years later, it's still the same. But the government has a big hand in it. And then the creatives as well have a hand in it to educate others about their products. And then when their rights are being violated, to try to seek enforcement of it. Enforcement can be a very expensive situation. And so sometimes a lot of people don't even bother because they can barely make ends meet with what they have. But if you just collectively do all of that, it can make or help reduce the problem a little bit, but it wouldn't make it per se go away.
Thank you very much. Daniel, you have a question.
As Mrs. Uduak was
Yes.
answering the question, so my
Yes.
dad came to me, and I remember that.
Corrected, Daniel. Yes, not Mrs. I'm a miss.
Okay, Miss, I'm sorry, my deepest apologies. I remember that I just remembered now that AFTA is now in operation, at least the phase one of AFTA, and there are a lot of projections that the economic benefits that AFTA will bring to the African market, and of course, AFTA has opened the African market, has enabled or will enable Africans to intertrade among themselves. And for instance, Nigeria, we closed our borders, but when we signed AFTA, the government was compelled to rescind its decision and then open its border. So I want to ask, I have several questions from that angle. One, how can fashion designers and fashion legal practitioners leverage on this instrument, this legal instrument, to
Intertrade abilities.
Yeah.
Well, let me step back, and I think it goes back to Clarice's question, I think, or no, Christiana's question on the whole sort of like, we talk about having a strong constitution. What does that really mean? You have to be an entrepreneur and be strategic. Over and over again, you have intertrade, African intertrade. We haven't even conquered Africa, but as the average Nigerian, and this is, I think, very specific to a Nigerian problem, we're always number one that want to go global before we conquer our local markets. Standard, right? Anybody show up, go blue. I want to be overseas. We've been able to do it with music. We've been able to do it with certain other areas, but it takes time, and you have to build a strong infrastructure and operational system. I love switching into Pidgin, especially when I'm talking with my people, because I think that even in our courts, you do know that Pidgin is allowed, and sometimes I just want to get down in there and get nitty gritty. So it's it's important to understand that you have to build a strong infrastructure, right? So business operations, right? No, the only government is supposed to build infrastructure all the time. You self build your own infrastructure, because then it spills out to the rest of the society. So if you don't know how to do good business and have system operations that make you efficient, then all you're thinking myopically is create a product and export it out, but you haven't thought about how that whole process works and how you get the product to your customer and be profitable over and over again. To begin with, there's so many challenges on the continent, starting first with power supply to even run a business. So when you are running a business, you cannot afford to waste resources that you already don't have. And a big part of that is looking at your distribution. If it's easier and cheaper to distribute to people next door to you, your fellow Africans who understand the African culture and who are more likely to buy your product, I can wear very comfortably in Kenya or in Ghana a Nigerian outfit and most likely show up in office setting, and nobody is gonna think I'm unprofessional, right? I mean, Okonjo-Iweala, the new WTO president that we have now, wears her outfit, you know, traditional outfit everywhere she goes. We can comfortably do that among ourselves and not have to explain who we are. If I wore the same thing, same outfit, and went into a courtroom here in America, they're gonna probably say, waiting happen, you be unprofessional, and it might be this kata kata that would be created. So if you want to export, and that was a very, very hard challenge, because here in the US, I launched Lady Bill magazine, a fashion publication, precisely because of that point, because I wanted us to have some infusion of our identity through fashion in what we wore and how we moved around, and have it more in a contemporary, sophisticated situation. But one of the quick things I quickly realized was, as I set that up, my audience, it was very interested, but to send them to where they can buy this product of all these amazing fashion designers that I say have the product, impossible. Website, not functional. Shopping platforms, not functional. I mean, it's just impossible. And then the alarming cost, obviously, of shipping and handling just one product or 10 products, it just was not practical or sustainable. So the first thing first, before you want to run over, particularly to the West, and showcase your product everywhere, get it right first at home and get it intercontinental with everybody else, because that helps you get prepared for the international market. Half the time, another thing that came about and over time that I saw is, so you give a lot of visibility and publicity and marketing and promotions for African fashion brands. I certainly did that for over a decade on my platforms. When you do that, assuming that designer gets publicity, all over in Europe and America, they're saying, yeah, this person showed at New York Fashion Week or Paris, and everybody's like, Nigeria has arrived, they're great, blah, 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 blah. But what ends up happening is, if I'm an American buyer and I say, hey, major Nigerian fashion brand, can you please produce 1,000 units of that particular item I saw on the runway? I like it, and I'd like to make sure it gets into Macy's on the floor for people to buy. Half the time, not half the time, over half, majority, 99.9% of our designers cannot meet that demand. Why can't they meet that demand? Because they don't have the business operations and infrastructure and just know how to do business first, especially in a climate that is tough to do business. So master that first by taking advantage of this Intertrade Act that's been passed. And that will allow you then to create systems that's efficient, that then allows you to reach more of an international audience. And it's particularly so for the kind of product that we have for fashion, as opposed to music or film, because music and film, we now have a digital aspect to it, but fashion, you still got to wear the clothes. You still got to wear or use the apparel products or the beauty products, right? Beauty is not too much of an issue, but apparel, shoes, etc. So either way you cut it, figure it out first on the continent. That's how I would answer your question, Daniel.
Yes, ma. I think it's deep, but can I ask a follow-up question?
Juliana,
of course,
can you
I also.
Okay, I think you can just add one more.
Yeah, you can ask. You can ask as many. I just want to be sure that on the time that you're doing, you let me know. I created time for you guys, so.
Okay. So Daniel, you can continue.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, man. Okay, my follow-up question is you said, and I think opposite you that fashion law relies heavily on trademark law to protect itself. So, but we also made mention of copyrights. I just want to ask if the exceptions to copyright would be applicable here, because fashion designers would definitely need to make money off their designs and off their products. Now, for instance, we're talking about fair share, talking about, for instance, educational purposes, which are also exceptions to copyrights. Now, I just want to ask, for instance, if a fashion designer says, no, someone say, okay, I'm using your design, or I'm using this copyright idea for education purpose. Well, a fashion designer is saying, no, I need to make money off this brand, of this particular design, of this idea. How do we balance this? Because
Well,
nowadays the law
put
allows.
idea, you first put idea out because you know under copyright law it has to be in a concrete form for it to be protected. So if you have idea, can't help you because it's not fixed in a tangible medium of expression, or your copyright law basically just in a concrete form. So we're not doing idea. However, with respect to designs and you're saying no, you can't. If you say no, you can't, then if you say no, if Daniel tells me as a designer and I'm interested in using his designs that no, I can't give you because I really have to be profitable in it, then Daniel needs to go find somebody that he can market and sell his designs at the kind of price points that will help him make money off it. If it's infringement, we already talked about, you sue them. That's your only real remedy, and sending them a cease and desist letter. Or you can try to negotiate if they're going to give you certain proceeds of what's already out there and then to stop the infringing. And that would be what that cease and desist letter is. But beyond the scope of that, if it's trying to make money off, willing and dealing or of your copyright, then you need to negotiate and learn how to negotiate with the right people who can afford to pay for what you're asking for. If not, you're still going to have your copyright with you, but you're not making money. You're just holding on to it, but you're not making any money. So that would be what will happen. On the trademark side, I mean, same thing, just because you have a logo Gucci on my blouse doesn't mean you're making money. It means that you still have to engage, this is also part of fashion and fashion law. You have to engage the marketing and promotions arm of the law, not only in hiring the talent to advertise, that's where fashion models come in, advertising agencies come in to help you craft a campaign. You have to get all those people involved in order to market and promote your product for people to buy and purchase it. So that would be how you would approach that for purposes of being profitable and balancing the scale of still protecting your works, right? So register your work, but at the same time, you've got to push marketing and promo. Let me use the music context because sometimes it's easier for a lot of people to understand. So you could have Wizkid or Davido create something now. Now they can create music and drop and everybody globally hears it and immediately goes, buys or streams it, right? But when they first started, I still have a thing where Davido started to follow me first on one of my platforms, Lady Bro. This was way, way, way back before he even became known. Well, at that time, if you dropped music or even sent it to me, I probably wouldn't really notice him, right? Because he hasn't really done much to market and promote that song and to put himself out. So he went and did all that work with the, collaboration with other artists, making good beats and sending all kinds of artists to actually, sing on his beat, among other things. And he's here today. So you have to really put that marketing and promotions at a grassroots level on that kind of work, word of mouth. And then, of course, as you get up, using your other ways of marketing and advertising, traditional media, social media, on all different forms, earned media, paid media, owned media, to get the word out about your product.
Thank you so much, Ma. I think
You're welcome, Daniel.
yeah.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for the questions. It's
Thank you,
very
Daniel.
good.
So does anyone else have any other question? While we're waiting, I think I'll just ask one. So I want to know how is the ownership structure like in the fashion industry, like for employers and employees? So if you have employees that do like the drawings and the design, etc. Yes, I know that it falls mostly like on the contracts that they have between them, but I would just like to hear from your own perspective what it's like for the ownership structure of the designs and the trademarks, etc.
Sure. A lot of the large companies, so I'm in the Bay Area, and two of the large companies, fashion companies here are Gap and Levi's. You know, they employ a lot of people. So those are the two that come to mind right now, based out of San Francisco. So for those two companies, they hire hundreds of employees, and for them, any kind of IP creativity that employees bring into the workplace is basically signed over and under the umbrella of the employment agreement. If it is a commissioned work, so work that is commissioned independent of the employment setting, then there would have to be a work made for hire agreement, which explicitly says this is a written, explicitly says this is a commission work, and I, the employer, am owning that outright. Otherwise, that work that the employee is creating within the context of employer-employee would belong to the employer. So that's basically the ownership structure of IP in the fashion context. It's no different than any of the other areas of law, and no different than what's going on under the Nigerian structure on IP ownership overall, although there's some nuances with yours depending on the kind of IP work, whether we're talking more literary work as we saw with the whole Ebony Life situation, or a different kind of work.
Thank you very much, Ms. Uduak. I think everyone has asked their question, and no one indicated that they had any more questions to ask. I am so happy that you took out the time to talk about fashion law, entertainment industry, IP, etc. I am so excited. Thank you so much. And I'm sure, sorry, my daughter is disturbing me. And I'm so
push her out like those videos.
I'm like, wait, please wait, I'm coming. So, sorry. So we have our office in home. So
I think everybody is experiencing that problem. Well, it's not really a problem. Yeah. Had a lot of, remember the major news caster guy? Do you remember that clip? And his style, and it's like, oh. It was so global. And the recent legal one, I don't know if you guys saw that, the lawyer that was in court and accidentally used a cat filter, and he said, I'm not a cat.
No.
Get the filter off.
Oh my God, no.
Yeah. Oh, that went viral everywhere. So.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. Wow. So thank you. Thank you so much. Truth is that actually, like I think 3 or 4 years ago, I was thinking of something, and then I wrote it down and all that. Then about 6 or 7 months later, when I was trying to solidify the idea, I decided to check online, and I discovered that you were already doing something like that. That was the first time that I even saw something about you. That was on Facebook. That's your podcast. Because I was thinking about doing something like that, and I was thinking of that name, and I was thinking of the slogan. When I said, I was like, oh my God, someone is already doing this. And that's just like what we talk about copyrights. Like, you can have an idea in your head and everything, but once it's not tangible, someone else can just do it, then the trademark and all that. So that was the first time that I came in contact with your work. And then subsequently I was checking out things online, and I saw people just saying my mentor, and then I checked you out and all that. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. This is 12 weeks.
Quick things on that point. Let me say 2 quick things on that point. So I a little over 10 years ago, when I decided to walk this exclusive journey on the law side, but I've been online for over 14 years doing strictly African fashion entertainment, more so the reporting side. But when I decided to start doing law, I registered africamusiclaw.com, africafashionlaw.com, and africafilmlaw.com. I did not expect African music law to take up too much of my time because I'm a fashion and film person. But African music law started to take up a lot of my time. And I said, okay, between my practice of law and then my fashion law stuff I do here, and then African music law now, I don't know that I'm able to then go do a separate Africa fashion law and Africa film law. So when it came time for renewal of those domains, I let it go. Some years later, Annie Oti contacts me about Africa fashion law. And I said, oh my God. And now she's doing Africa fashion. I said, oh my God, it's a small world. And I tell her that story. And then the second one is, and I know you've had some of my mentees from Ire and Fosa, Irejimari and Fosa come here. I think 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago at least, they both contacted me and they were still in law school. And the way they found me was they were looking for entertainment law and went online and saw my blog, right? African music law. And I think they were the first people that let me know that there was a growing group and movement of people in Africa, not just in Nigeria, that are using my platform to learn about entertainment law and then launching their careers. And they asked me explicitly, can you mentor us? And I said, sure. So the point of saying that to everyone here is, look for those people, look for those platforms. They're out there. And even if they're not out there, then maybe you could build your own. But ANIOT certainly has African fashion law going. My platform is there. And even some of my other platforms that I still talk about fashion law, look for all those platforms and then use them to build your own. What those attorneys that came to talk to you recently, look at what they've accomplished just by going online alone and finding a blog and podcast and saying, can you mentor us? 1 second, please. Can you mentor us? And now we're all benefiting, in Nigeria from that. They've been able to start their own law firms. They've been able to help a lot more people. So it's very important to take the initiative, not just sit there and say, oh, I want to do it. And then you never do it. And because you won't follow your own calling, other people don't get to be blessed by you. So you can't just be the receiver. You need to move on things and not sit there thinking there is no fashion law really practice, and entertainment law is still at the very infancy stage in Nigeria. Give me 1 second, please. So I did not fully plug this in. Okay, so get ready and get going. Don't waste time. That's really what I want you all to really get from this. Don't waste time. No one's gonna come and teach you hand by hand, step by step. Got to roll your sleeves and get into it, and then find those resources and use them as well.
Thank you once again. So this is a 12 weeks course and this is our 11th week. So
awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah,
well,
you're the final mentee for this, mentor for this quarter, and we'll be having our closing ceremony next week. I'll send you an invite if you have the time.
Sure.
Please join us and give like a 5-minute talk to just encourage as we close. Yes.
Awesome. Congratulations to each one of you. What an honor. I'm glad that I was able to be here to help you all close out the mentorship part. It's so awesome. And I want to encourage you, and Juliana, I want to encourage you too. Half the time, I know that feeling when you're walking and trailblazing a path or opening something. It can be sometimes lonely because you don't really have people to see where you're going. Over here in the US, trying to tell someone you're doing African music law related or African fashion law, no one really gets you when there's nothing out there. But you've got to stay the course and know and understand your vision and keep at it, and it all comes to fruition. So this is fantastic what you're doing and how you're pouring into everybody else. Thank you for having me, everyone. Christiana, Clarice, Bernice, Daniel, great questions, and thank you all for attending.
Thank you. So everybody, I'd like you to just tell her thank you before she goes. Okay, so
thank you so much, Ma. Thank you
so much, Ma.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.
And a lovely weekend.
Thank you. Likewise, Juliana. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Bye, Ma.
Bye.